A young man is sitting on the road next to his burning car after an accident on the Brooklyn Bridge. He stands up and walks straight ahead. The scene abruptly shifts, and a sleeping man awakens from his slumber, confused. He's holding a lovely ring. Perhaps he's planning to propose to someone. He gets ready and rides his bicycle to work. He meets his girlfriend, Leela, who lives with him. He tells her that he couldn't sleep because the neighbor's baby was crying. But Leela informs him that their neighbors are an elderly couple with no children. He then walks away to his office. But as Leela turns to say a word to him, he is gone. He visits Beth Levy's office, where a patient is waiting. He introduces himself as Sam Foster and informs him that he will be the one to treat him from now on. After hearing this, the young man, named Henry Latham, becomes enraged. He speaks to Sam with reserve, but as a psychiatrist, he does so gently. When Sam asks him why he set fire to his car, Henry says he has no idea how it started and doesn't want to hurt anyone. Sam inquires as to whom he has harmed, but he responds that he does not know and prepares to leave. Sam tries to stop him, but he insists on getting home before the hail begins. While the sky is clear, according to Sam, the weather service has made no such prediction. Henry walks away, leaving Sam perplexed, and the scene shifts to a couple sitting on a bench below, where Leela tells Sam a story about a king and a moose. He grabs her wrist with deep bruises on it and they both get sad looking at it. When hail begins to fall, they both flee to a shelter. In the following scene, Henry is sitting on a train, smoking, and an old man forbids him, but he continues to do so. He scolds him repeatedly. Then Henry lights the cigarette on his wrist, and the old man storms out. Sam returns home and leaves a message for Dr. Beth Levy, stating that he met her patient Henry Latham today and would like to speak with her about it and that she should contact him. Sam also tells Leela about Henry and how he correctly predicted hail today. Sam adds that he has read all of today's newspapers and no mention of hail has been made. Leela, unsure of her abilities as an artist, asks Sam if the world will remember her, and he assures her that it will. The next day, Henry pays an unexpected visit to Sam's office. At first, Sam asks Henry how he knew it was going to hail, but he has no answer. He informs Sam that he is hearing voices. Sam is intrigued and instructs him to write down what he hears. Meanwhile, Sam receives a voice message from Frederick. Sam requests that Henry read what he wrote to him. He had heard what Frederick had said in his voicemail. When Sam tells him that the voice is real, Henry becomes agitated and tells him that he doesn't know the difference between a real and a fake voice. Sam notices Henry's burn mark on his hand and inquiries about it. Henry responds that he is preparing to go to hell. When Sam asks why he thinks he's going to hell, Henry says it's because of what he did and what he's going to do next. He informs him that he intends to commit suicide at midnight on Saturday. Sam tries to call the police, but Henry says he'll see him again and then they will talk. What Henry says bothers Sam a lot, and he thinks about him constantly. He visits his friend Dr. Wren at Club Med, where he is treated for his neurotic stockbroker. Sam tells him about Henry and suggests that he be kept in his facility. Dr. Wren, on the other hand, says that he can't keep Henry here forever and that he will definitely take this step when he leaves. Sam keeps track of Leela's antidepressant medication. When Leela returns from buying groceries, she notices Sam upset and tries to ask him why, but Sam refuses to answer. When Leela asks if it's a suicide, Sam tells her that Harry is planning to commit suicide on Saturday night. Leela tells him that things like that no longer scare her, but Sam responds that he is afraid if she ever does something like that again. The next day, Sam notices some people carrying a piano upstairs and a girl walking by with her mother outside the house. Sam meets Henry at the art gallery and inquiries about the paintings on display, wondering if they were created by him. In the same passage, Henry expresses his own opinion that bad art is tragically beautiful in comparison to good art. When Sam asks Henry what's special about the coming Saturday, Henry says it's his 21st birthday. Sam tells Henry that he wants to commit suicide so that it will not affect his parents, but Henry responds that they are already dead. He then inquiries about his relatives, to which he replies that he has none. Henry tells him that he was going to marry his girlfriend, Athena, who worked as a waitress at a club. Henry also tells him that he bought a ring similar to the one Sam has. Sam informs him that he purchased it. Henry concurs and admits that he has lost it. Then, Henry is watching a walrus swim in the zoo through a glass wall when an old couple's shadow appears in the glass and tells him that he is not going to make it. In the next scene, Sam is with Leela, admiring her painting. Leela inquiries about Henry, but he refuses to discuss it. Sam tells her that she has stopped taking her medications. Leela is taken aback by this and tells him he should believe her. Leela requests that Sam introduce her to Henry. She will tell him that the world is too beautiful to live in. Leela calls Sam Henry as he walks away, and he turns around and tells Leela that she called him Henry, but Leela says she knows Sam's name and can't make that mistake. Sam becomes agitated and departs. Sam is playing chess with Dr. Leon Patterson, who is blind but very skilled at defeating Sam. Sam shows them the ring, congratulates him, and asks when he will give it to Leela. Sam says this when he is free of his fear and certain that Leela will not attempt suicide again. Meanwhile, Henry arrives there. Sam introduces him to Dr. Leon, but Henry is taken aback, and he informs Sam that he is dead. So how is he still alive? Sam tells Henry that it can't be because he's known Leon for so long, and Henry tells him that Dr. Leon is his father. Henry begins to cry bitterly, claiming that he witnessed his death. Dr. Leon has left. Sam explains to Henry that Dr. Leon has no children, but Henry says he knows his father well. Sam claims his father is no longer alive, but the person who just left is actually his father. Henry begins to cry and breaks down, telling Sam that everything he knows is a lie. When Sam asks him to tell him the truth, Henry simply tells him that his troubles will cease and fortune will smile upon him and leave. Sam and some mates visit Henry's house and are shocked to see "Forgive me" written on all the walls. Dr. Wren checks Henry's answering machine and hears Sam's voice telling him to stay with him. Sam denies sending the message. Dr. Wren apologizes to Sam and says they have more pressing matters than a depressed college boy. Dr. Wren warns Sam that Henry hears voices and has a gun. A boy sees Henry in a park and asks his mother if he'll die. She leaves with the child. Sam and Leela are at home doing research on Henry. Leela informs him about a famous artist, Tristan Rivor, whom Henry also tells Sam about, but she explains that he burned all his paintings and died at the age of 21. Sam tells him Tristan is Henry's favorite artist and he might kill himself. Sam starts looking everywhere for Henry. He goes to Beth's house to talk about Henry, but she has a nervous breakdown. He then takes Henry's college address to his parents' house, where Henry's mother mistakes Sam for Henry and introduces him to their dog, Olive. Henry's mother starts bleeding from the head, but she won't let him help her. Meanwhile, Olive arrives and bites Sam's hand. Sam goes to emergency treatment and asks the town sheriff about Henry. The sheriff says Henry's mother died a few months ago, but Sam says he visited her recently and she had a deep head injury. Henry smokes and cries in a city club as childhood memories flash before his eyes. Sam relives the previous day's events on the way home. He asks a man if he was carrying the piano upstairs on Thursday, but he doesn't answer. Mentally exhausted, he can't understand what's happening. After he meets Leela and goes to his room, the scene reverses several times. He's worried because he's meeting dead people. Leela suggests that he should sleep. He sleeps after simply following Leela. He discovers Leela's note when he wakes up in the evening. As Sam leaves the house and he sees Henry out there, he tells him that he met his mother the night before. Henry is asking Sam about his mother as he walks down the stairs. Sam informs him that he told him that his mother and Olive are both deceased. Sam eventually becomes enraged and grabs Henry, questioning how he knows all of this and what is happening to him. Henry informs him that he is the only person who can assist him. Sam inquires as to what happened to his parents, but he remains silent. Sam follows Henry out of the building and tells him that if he tells him the truth, he will be able to help him. Henry responds in the same manner as he did to Leela. Sam then tells Henry how he discovered Leela in the bathtub, covered in blood, and how Leela managed to help herself, but Henry says it's too late for his case and departs. Sam pursues Henry, who pulls out a pistol and threatens him not to follow him, as well as telling him that he killed his parents himself before leaving. Sam rents a cab and goes to Canal Street to check out the clubs in order to meet Athena. He doesn't find Athena, but he does discover her address. He pays a visit to Athena while she is rehearsing with a boy at an acting school. He discusses Henry with Athena. They're both walking down the theater's stairs when Athena vanishes. His foot slips and he falls as he descends the stairs in search of Athena. His ring falls off and he loses it. He notices Athena practicing again and walks away without saying anything. Henry comes to see Dr. Leon at home when he panics and tells him to leave, but Henry puts his hand over his eyes and says he wants Leon to see him, and when he takes away his hand, Leon is now able to see everything. Henry hugs Leon and bids him farewell with tears in his eyes. Athena is driving with her friends on Brooklyn Bridge Road when she is involved in an accident. Sam goes to a library in search of Henry and discovers that he gave the library one of his paintings in exchange for all of Tristan Rivor's books. Henry, on the other hand, exits the train and stands in front of a dance studio, watching Athena perform. Sam calls Leela and asks where Tristan committed suicide. She tells him it was on the Brooklyn Bridge. Dr. Leon meets Sam, who is overjoyed and tells him that Henry has restored his eyes. Sam inquires about the time, which is 11:30. Dr. Leon has left with joy. Leela, on the other hand, is concerned about Sam and notices the paintings bearing Henry Letham's name. She flees after seeing the paintings but is unable to exit through the main gate. Henry is standing in front of a jewelry store when blood begins to pour from his head, drawing everyone's attention. Henry and Sam take separate trains to the Brooklyn Bridge station. When Sam spots Henry, he follows him and eventually finds him on the bridge. Sam tries everything he can to persuade Henry to change his mind, but Henry says it's too late and shoots himself. Then the scene shifts and all illusions fade away, revealing reality. According to Dr. Beth Levy, she witnessed the accident with her own eyes. The front tire of the car burst, and it was a horrific accident. Sam approaches Henry and examines him by beaming a flashlight into his eyes. Leela introduces herself as a nurse and administers first aid to Henry, instructing him to remain awake until an ambulance arrives. Sam grabs a ring that Henry is looking for after dropping it and gives it to him. Leela appears to Henry as Athena and proposes to her. All of the characters we've seen before gathering around Henry in despair, unable to bear the thought of a young man dying in such a way. Henry insists on marrying Leela, and Leela says yes despite his condition, and Henry loses his life as a result. Everyone is in tears as they watch him leave. Finally, Sam informs Leela that he will not be sleeping tonight and invites her over for coffee. Leela accepts his invitation, and the story comes to an end here.